Here's your complete start sit guide to every running back in every matchup of week 10 to make sure you make the correct start sit decision every single time. Starting off in the S tier with Saquon Barkley, no bias of any backwards hurdle nastiness that we saw last week. He gets a good matchup here against the Cowboys, who are top 3 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. Enough being said with that. If you guys do value a statistical breakdown of start sits every single week with running backs and wide receivers, make sure to subscribe if you are new. I post them every single week, and like this video if you do appreciate the statistical data knowledge that you get from watching these videos. But continuing down with the S tier, we're going to have Devon Achane, Kyren Williams, and Bijan Robinson. With Tua in this offense for the Dolphins, Devon Achane is averaging a minimum of 6 receptions a game, not even targets, and 25 fantasy points. Now he gets a top 10 matchup against the Rams, who allow a lot of success to fantasy running backs. With Kyren Williams, he is the RB1 in the entire NFL in rush share, the RB3 in carries inside the 5, and the RB2 in routes run per game. All amazing statistics. Even though he gets a negative matchup here against the Dolphins run defense, he's still going to be a guy that we need to be starting. Bijan, on the other hand, another running back that is top 5 in every single receiving statistic with targets and yards and everything in between, getting a top 10 matchup here against the Saints defense. We're dropping it down to the A tier here. We're going to start with Joe Mixon, the first running back that has a real bad matchup here. They face the Detroit Lions, who have the #1 toughest run defense in fantasy points allowed so far to the running back position. The good news is that the Texans run their offense through Joe Mixon completely, so whatever type of offense the Texans decide to run this week, it's not going to matter for Joe Mixon. He gets usage in the receiving game and a ton of ground usage as well. We just have to hope that this Lions matchup actually stays close, but Nico Collins should be coming back this week. Following that with Alvin Kamara against the Falcons, a tougher matchup, but we do see a trend with all of these top running backs. He is an insanely efficient running back in the receiving game. He is the RB1 in target share at 23%. That's higher than a lot of wide receiver ones in the NFL. So when we have Noah Olave also in this offense, you're going to expect them to lean on Alvin Kamara even more. But then we have Christian McCaffrey, the king, finally back in these rankings, now expected to make his return in this week in a very positive matchup here. We don't know exactly what to expect as far as snap percentage goes, but if we look at previous examples with guys like Nick Chubb and guys like TJ Hawkinson coming off really big injuries, we can't assume he's going to be on a snap count. Now, I think that's almost guaranteed, but the question is, how much of a snap restriction is he going to be on? Sportsbooks already have him projected for 80 rushing yards and a couple receptions for this week's matchup, so he can't really be on that much of a restriction if you have those numbers. Even if he is, I do expect the 49ers to put him in the game for the valuable touches in the red zone and in the third downs. And we'll follow that with Jonathan Taylor, Gibbs, Breece, and Aaron Jones. The Bills' secondary is absolutely amazing, so there is a chance that they completely fluster Joe Flacco and this game goes south. They completely abandon the run game, which is going to hurt Jonathan Taylor. But he is the RB1 in this offense, and he runs routes out of the backfield, so it's not all bad, but that's why he's a little bit lower in these rankings than you might assume. With Gibbs, he gets a tougher matchup here against the Texans, allowing the 8th least amount of points to opposing running backs this year. They are very tough, but we know the Lions' one and only goal is to run the ball and dominate on offense. So regardless of what this game looks like, they're going to stick to the run game, and he's a top running back in receiving statistics as well. He scores touchdowns on a high clip, which is what you like to see for running backs this high in usage. Breece Hall coming off 2 down games. Now he gets a matchup here against the Cardinals, who are top 7 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. In the fantasy numbers, he is a top guy in receiving usage and efficiency as well, so as long as that happens, there's going to be better days coming because his rushing usage as well over the past 2 weeks has been really, really good. 16 and 15 carries with great efficiency. They just haven't turned to fantasy points. So if he continues to see that many touches, he's going to be up here every single week. And Aaron Jones is getting one of the best matchups of the week here against the Jaguars run defense, especially as of late. They have not been able to stop anybody. If he falls into the end zone this week, he's going to be amazing. Hasn't been able to do that over the last few, but in this matchup, you can expect them to stick to the run. But looking it down to the B tier, we're going to start with DeAndre Swift and James Cook. Swift getting elite usage. He's had 18 or more total touches in the last 5 games straight, and he's averaging 21.4 touches on the season, which is absolutely amazing. Now getting a matchup against a Patriots defense, which has been falling off as of late as well. Cook next, again, has been great in usage, but didn't see a touchdown last week. But that doesn't really matter when your usage and receiving utilization is just very consistent, which it has been in this matchup against the Colts, which allow a ton of big plays this season. Now we have Kareem Hunt next up and Tyrone Tracy. Hunt thrives off straight run volume alone. He's the RB1 in carries per game, the RB4 in rush share, and the RB1 in usage inside the 5. So we don't have Pacheco back this week. As long as that happens, he's going to be a top guy and will be treated as an RB1 even in this tougher matchup against the Broncos run defense, where if they stop the run, it might be a little bit tough just because he doesn't get receptions, but still, he has touchdown upside and a great offense. Tracy has fully immersed himself as this Giants RB1 in every single statistic and even sportsbook projections. He's been a top 10 running back in route participation since he became the de facto starter in week 5 when Devin Singletary went out, and is still that now. He just had his high snap percentage with Devin Singletary healthy last week. That's a great sign. He's projected for just under 80 rushing yards this week against the Panthers, who allow the #1 most points to opposing running backs. We're going to be firing him up. It is officially Tyrone Tracy season. Following that with James Conner and J.K. Dobbins next up. Conner gets a tough matchup against the Jets here, and they're bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to running backs, which isn't good when their offense is a little bit more unpredictable in the Cardinals. But even with DeMarcado and Trey Benson scoring a touchdown and over 10 fantasy points last week, James Conner still did fine. He's put up 14 or more fantasy points in 7 out of his last 9 games. As far as Dobbins, he absolutely destroyed last week with over 100 all-purpose yards and 2 touchdowns against a very good Browns run defense, which are allowing some of the least amount of yards per carry to running backs this year. So if he can do that, he'll be fine. In another tough matchup against the Titans this week, the utilization until Edwards comes back is going to be great. Dropping it over to the C tier, we do have David Montgomery and Najee Harris. Like Jahmyr Gibbs, the Lions are going to run regardless of what the game script suggests you to do. And David Montgomery just came off a game where he had his highest snap percentage of the season, likely because they really did not use Jahmyr Gibbs until the second, third, and fourth quarter because they want to establish the run and tire out defenses early. That's kind of their thing, and they saw that last week. So do I expect him to have a 60% snap share again? No, but I do still expect him to see double-digit carries, and that's really all he needs with the touchdown upside that he does have in the red zone. With Najee, he gets a boost with Russell Wilson at quarterback. Number 1, because he's not stealing his rushing touchdowns. Number 2, he throws more checkdowns. And number 3, the opportunities for more yards after contact against light boxes is really good, so there's a higher chance that he gets bigger plays and actually can run the ball for more than 2 yards per carry. The Commanders' defense has been better as of late, but they're not impossible to run on. We're going to be following that with Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson, and Ramondre Stevenson. Pollard is still dealing with injury coming into this week with a tough matchup against the Chargers. But last week he was questionable, looking like he might miss the game, but he ended up playing and still saw 31 total touches, which is absolutely insane. So, I mean, there really shouldn't be anything different this week. Brian Robinson gets a very tough matchup here against the Steelers defense, who are bottom 5 in fantasy points allowed to running backs, and he's still limited. He's questionable for this week, but if he's healthy, we are going to be playing him. He's averaging over 14 fantasy points a game in every healthy matchup. This offensive play calling definitely helps him out a lot, and they're scoring some of the most in the league. Following that with Ramondre Stevenson and the Patriots, the offense is really an anomaly because Ramondre is averaging less than 2 yards per carry this season, but the Patriots are scoring a good amount, and he's had 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, so I guess it doesn't matter. If he's not efficient, he's still going to get usage, especially considering he's seeing RB1 level snaps compared to the other running backs like JaMycal Hasty and Antonio Gibson in this backfield, so as long as that happens, I guess we're going to be starting him. He will be in this rank. And moving it over to the D tier, we have Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. We do expect to see Jonathan Brooks make his return this week, but they have their bye week in week 11, so I don't expect Brooks to see a ton of usage. He'll likely be limited in this week 10 matchup, and then in their week 11 bye, he'll have time to review the film and actually be ready because he's still only 21 years old, coming off a major injury, and the Panthers aren't really playing for anything. They don't have a good record, so there's no reason to just throw him out there and give him a bunch of touches. So Chuba is still going to be that guy. He's the RB9 in yards per carry on the season, and he is very efficient coming into this matchup against the Giants, which is a very positive one. Rico Dowdle on the other side is becoming one of my favorite sleeper running backs, but now that we have Cooper Rush at the quarterback position, the upside for him and really everybody else is going to move down. My wide receiver rankings are coming tomorrow. You don't want to miss those. And see where CD is ranked because this team is 3rd in passing attempts, but they're 32nd in rushing attempts. So now that you have a little bit of a downgrade in Cooper Rush, it's going to be harder to get in the red zone and score touchdowns for Rico Dowdle, which is putting him in this ranking where he is. But then we're going to have Bucky Irving and Rachaad White tied up here together. I would start them in this order, considering Bucky Irving had more than 50% of the total touches in this offense last week, despite only playing 35% of the snaps. That doesn't seem to matter. Bucky Irving is the potential RB1, but they're still splitting a good amount, almost 50-50. So Bucky is questionable. If he misses, Rachaad White is going to move up a good amount in these rankings. But regardless, they get a matchup against the 49ers, which isn't an impossible team to run on, but definitely not the best. With their receiving numbers and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin not being in this offense, they are getting more usage, and they are ranked here together. Mostert and Austin Eckler are tied up next. Mostert against the Rams is a positive matchup, but he's not a great amount viable unless he does score a touchdown. He's averaging 10 touches a game, which isn't bad for a Dolphins offense, but he's fumbled twice in the last 3 games, so that's not really going to give him more usage. And with Austin Eckler, if we have Brian Robinson playing, he's going to stay in these rankings. He is a great chip blocker and helps his Commanders offensive line out a ton, which is allowing him to run more routes out of the backfield, but if Brian Robinson is healthy, he's going to be a secondary to him. And then we're going to go down to the E tier with Javonte Williams. A lot of you guys might be confused about why he's this low based on his recent success, but he does get the number 1 toughest matchup here against the Chiefs, who allow the least points to running backs. Wide receivers and quarterbacks are also bottom 3 for points allowed to them, so it is really tough, and he's fully dependent on Bo Nix and what he can do. I expect him to be struggling this week, which is not going to give Javonte a ton of touchdown upside, and you're going to hope that he gets the receptions, because if he doesn't, he might not do too good this week. But we're going to be following that with Jaylen Warren, Tank, and Travis Etienne. All 3 of these guys are questionable coming into this week, which is unfortunate. but Jaylen Warren does get a matchup against the Commanders, and the Jaguars running backs get a matchup against the Vikings. Both of these matchups aren't necessarily positive. The Vikings matchup is worse. And then we're going to have Brooks and Tajay Spears, both backup running backs with downsides, considering that they're both the secondary running back to their competitors in the backfield. And then we drop that down to the F tier with a couple more handcuff running backs you can consider starting, but wouldn't be my first options with Jordan Mason. Christian McCaffrey, we still don't really know how much usage he's going to get, so Jordan Mason will probably get a little bit of run, not enough in the valuable parts of the field to be started. Following that with Ray Davis, Tyler Algier, and Roschon Johnson. But that's going to finish off these running back tiers. I will see you guys in the wide receiver version of this video coming tomorrow. Thank you so much.